Hey, good morning, everybody. Or I know time zones are exceptionally tricky today of all days. Good afternoon if you're someplace where you've been up a while. Oh, hey, Vishwa, good morning. Hey, or good afternoon. I think it might be a bit later for you. Or good evening if you're joining us. I hope it's not too terribly late for you. Today, we are going to have an incredibly laid back day. For those of you who are in areas don't work, that don't use daylight savings time, this is an hour later than usual, and I'm very sorry. I want to go on record to say daylight savings time was not my idea, and I think it was a terrible idea, really, just all fuss. So it's evening where you are. Oh gosh, I hope it's not too terribly late. We'll go ahead and we'll look at scheduling to see if we can get stuff covered as well as possible. So we're going to come in and we're going to get started with CSS Grid. And I've done something foolish with my browser where it just keeps defaulting to not showing me the instructions. If y'all can be real patient with this, we'll just get by. So let's talk about what CSS Grid is. So Grid is, oh, Monica's saying that it's a bit late there where you are. We're still waiting to announce stuff for January, but maybe we can go ahead and make that a little bit less bad for you. Maybe, we'll see. So we're going to be talking about CSS Grid today. And we talked about CSS Flex last time, right? And that's a model we can use and sorry, my watch is loud. And the models. It's a model you can use, CSS Flexbox, and then the properties that are attached to that model that let us sort of squish things based on their parents. And today we're going to be learning about CSS Grid. And it's a model just like Flexbox, but instead of putting stuff in a box based on its parent and squishing it, we're going to this is not going to be shocking. We're going to be going ahead and building out grids and turning an HTML element into a grid container to contain other things. So we're still talking about rectangles and we're still talking about parents and children, but here we're using sort of a mental model of a grid and some properties that go along with it. We've got a note here that says, wait. One thing that's really important to note in CSS Grid is that we start calling our parent elements the container when we talk about grids, and the children elements inside are called items. So it's still a parent, it's still a child, but we're going to be talking about them in terms of container and items. And what I'd love if you all can do me a huge favor if I mess up and say parent and children, be like, no, wait, you mean container. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to change the display of the div with the container class to grid. We could do that. So, and look at this. This has given us so many hints. You know what? Platypus has a really good point. So, you know what? This is fancy tables. And for those of you who are very young, oh gosh, what a stressful time to be young. I'm so sorry. Those of us who are ancient, we remember that when you made a website back in the day, you would really have to build sort of very explicit tables. And sometimes you could make them invisible and you could do your layout that way. And this really feels like a callback. This is like, hey, this is fancy tables again, but much more invisible and much more flexible and much less miserable than the late 90s. So what we're going to do is we're going to set container. Oh, I'm wrong. It's the display property. Set the display property to grid. Oh, that hasn't done a heckin' thing, has it? So far, all we've said is the container. And I think that's this big box that contains these other boxes. So the conceptual rectangle, which is the parent element of these, is changed to grid. And the only thing we've done is we said, hey, we want to be using the grid model here. So I don't think we didn't see any change. Let's continue on with this and see if we see some change. 5% complete. Oh, heck. And that's my rubbish browser. I don't mean to smack talk Chrome, but StreamYard only really seems to be friendly with Chrome. Personally, I'd rather spend my time somewhere else. So we've already set our grid. We say, hey, we're using the mental model, and we want you, our browser, to follow us on this mental model of breaking this up using grid. The browser's like, okay, I got you. But all you've done so far is applied the model. And now what it's saying is we can add some columns on the grid using the grid template columns property. So here's an example. We've got display grid, and they've given us an example of, I'm just going to copy this in because I'm lazy. Ooh. So they've given us the grid template columns of 50 pixels and 50 pixels. So I'm saying, hey, I want you to go ahead and make some columns. And this is giving me 2 columns that are 50 pixels each. So I'm going to say, you know what, take the items within this container and structure them so that they're in 2 columns of 50 pixels each. This is pretty rad. This is weird, right? So what you're really doing is you're drawing tables using code. And a lot of people find this conceptually really challenging. Hopefully you've been doing your homework first and then joining us for review. But if you've been doing this and you finish all this and you say, Jess, grid still feels weird. I mean, right? I know. I mean, still feels weird for me too. But you can immediately feel how wonderfully powerful it is. But here we're going to change this. We want it to be 3 columns, and we're going to tab this over just to keep it human readable. We want 3 columns of 100 pixels. Oh, heck. Get rid of our showing the source code. We're going to get rid of our columns. So we're right back into rows. We don't have any columns anymore. I'm going to say, hey, give me 1 column of 100 pixels. Ooh. Now, please give me another column of 100 pixels. Yeah. And give me another column of 100 pixels. Ooh. And I could just keep going. And it would keep building me this grid to match the way I've mapped it in my brain, which is really exciting. I hear a lot of people talking about grid and saying it's really helpful and it's really helpful in web development generally, to get a piece of paper and draw out what you'd like your design to look like. And I think grid especially benefits from this. So we've got 3 pixels. We've got 3 columns. They're all 100 pixels wide. We're going to run our tests. And everything continues to be super chill, except for having to consistently resize this. How annoying. So in the exact same way that we can set columns, I bet we can do rows. Yeah. And the syntax for that is grid template columns to build some columns and grid template rows to go ahead and build out some rows. We're going to add 2 rows to our grid, to our table, our conceptual table, that are 50 pixels tall each. We can do this. So it's grid. Don't worry if this still feels weird. It still feels weird too. We template rows. We want 2 of these. So we say, hey, give me 1 row that's 50 pixels tall. Ooh. And here, because they're already in 2 rows, we're just having it match the size, aren't we? Give me another 50 pixel. Ooh. And we could keep going. It would get nice and weird. We're going to stop because we're following the instructions. We're going to hit Control Enter. Oh, is that not working? It's Command. And that tells us we're doing fine. We are just bopping along really chill. Look how weird all of this is. So we've got some irregular shaped stuff going on. So remember, and those of you who are just joining us for the first time, hello. But you didn't miss it a lot, but we've talked several times about the types of measurements we use in web development. And we use absolute units like pixel or relative units like, well, let's look at these grid units. These seem useful. FR sets the column or a row to a fraction of the available space. Auto automatically sets the column or row to the height of his content. So we say, hey, go ahead and match the size of the item to the size of the container. And percentage adjusts the column or row to be a percentage of the container. If the container is 100 pixels tall, and you say, hey, I want this item, this child within the parent, to be 10%, you're going to wind up with a 10 pixel item, aren't you? So here's the code that generates the output in the free view. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm rubbish. So we've got grid template columns, auto, 50 pixels, 10%, 2 FR, so 2 fractions of the row, or 1 FR. And this feels weird, right? Right? Let's, oh, hey, good morning and good afternoon. Oh, everything's chill. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and what are we going to do? Let's go ahead and get weird. So when we're not sure about something, we can ask somebody, we can look it up, or we can get weird. And here, conceptually, we've got a bunch of different things going on. And I want to feel out what these do. So this one, which is pixels, that's probably going to feel the most natural. That's going to be the orange one right there. If I change that to 5 pixels, not only does it jump, but the other things jump too, because they're taking up different amounts of space. So let's look at this. This snippet creates 5 columns. The code we were looking at right here, let me leave this highlighted, is creating 5 columns. And what's going on here is the first column is as wide as its content. And that means the blue box here is only big enough to contain what is inside the number 1. All right, that's cool. The second column, this orange one, this is 50 pixels. We're fine with that, 50 pixels. The third column is 10% of its container and its parent. And for the last 2 columns, the remaining space is divided into 3 sections. So say, hey, let's look at the space we have left after the rest of our containers. So after the blue and orange and teal, we say, what do we have left for salmon and green? And we've used these FRs to do a fraction. I say, hey, give me 2 fractional units of what's left. And the green says, give me 1 fractional unit. So the pink is going to go ahead and take up 2/3, or 2/3 is the easiest way to say that, of the remaining space. Whereas the green one is going to go ahead and take the last fraction, the last 1/3. And this feels weird, right? This is just going to feel weird until we've done it long enough for it just to feel a little less weird. So let's try that. We want 1 FR columns. Let's go ahead and add another 100 pixels. Ooh. So one of our columns is 1 FR, so 1 fraction, 1 unit. The other one is 100 pixels. Sorry. I'm going to go ahead and just throw my devices across the room. Sorry, I'm usually so good about setting do not disturb. I'm a terrible teacher and a terrible person. But we're going to create a third column. And that third column is going to be 2 FR. So I think we're going to see some squishing here. What do you all think this is going to look like? While I'm waiting, so we've got 1 FR and 100 pixels. What do we think it's going to look like when we add this third column that's 2 FR, like for real? Ooh, so does the column width only go from left to the right? So for fractions, it might change. If we go to the right to the left, I bet that I bet by default, it's going to go to the right to the left. I bet there are ways we can turn that around. And I think we're pretty likely to get through those today. And if not, we can look them up on MDM. That's super chill. Egg Roll's asking, oh, hey, Jess, do you get paid for this? And in a very complex way, we're going to be bringing on some sponsors for future projects, which will help do that. But for now, I'm mostly just hanging out to bother y'all. So what do we think is going to happen? I think what might happen, I confess I didn't do this before. I'm such a bad teacher. I'm so you know what? No, it's just early in the morning. I'm going to give myself a break. I think that the ones we've got in the middle, these 100 pixel ones, I think they're going to stay the same size. But I think we're going to see the first, wait, where am I? I think we're going to see this first column get smaller. So I think the new one, the one that's going to be over here, the third column, I think it's going to be twice as big. That seems confident. We feel okay. I think it's going to be twice as big. Yeah. Ooh. And by luck, it looks like one fractional unit is about 100 pixels. So these two balance out really well. Isn't this weird? And those of you who like really get grid on a conceptual level, you all are going to have to yell at me this whole time because I still have a really challenging time with it, mentally mapping it. So what we've done so far is we've made columns and made rows. And so far, there's no space between the columns, but we can add spaces if we want. And the way we do that is grid column gap. Just taking a wild guess, putting our brains to work here. If we wanted to create a gap between our rows, what do you think that would look like? If our property for setting a gap between columns is grid column, yeah, it would probably be grid column rows, we think, don't we? So we've got a really good question. When are we going to start learning JavaScript? So we're going to be going ahead and announcing future bootcamp stuff soon. Let me go ahead and actually check and see. Oh, cool. So we're going to be announcing what's going to happen with future cohorts in JavaScript soon. But I would expect maybe for everyone to take a little bit of time off over the holidays. Were we to come back and do stuff like that, it'd probably be in January, eh? Yeah. Get you all just in time for the New Year's resolutions and all that. But if you all are on Twitch, I'm going to start streaming some JavaScript stuff just for fun in the exact same time slot, because I confess my JavaScript is rubbish, and I'd like to patch it up before I do any teaching. Tunnel's saying, hey, you know what? When I do CSS, and this, you know what? You're doing it the most perfect way. Just get weird. Just experiment until it's right. And if it doesn't stick, that's fine. It doesn't stick in my head either. And I've been messing around with this for a million years. So we don't have an exact timing of the announcement. I'm so sorry. It's very frustrating. I'll mention it here. It'll go up on the forums and it'll be on Class Central. I'm so sorry that the world is slow and frustrating. So we're going to come in here, and while I chat to y'all, and you all can ask any questions you want while I do this, because I'm just going to type grid column. Have I spelled column right? Gap. And they've asked me to set this to 20 pixels. Oh, got a little bit of space there. Let's run our tests. We're 25% of the way done. This is so chill. Y'all are going to have a lot of extra free time to work on your projects. And that's what we're going to be doing next week as well. So next week, we're not going to have any lessons. Way! Next week, all we're going to do is do sort of question and answer around the projects and do a little bit of exploration. We're not going to take you all the way through the projects phase in the streams for the boot camp. You're going to have to go out into the world and work on the projects on your own, just because I mean, and because it's important to do some independent work. But if you're really, really struggling, we're still going to be there in the forums. And I bet it's not going to be that hard to find a study buddy if you want some help. We want to go ahead and set the grid row gap. And we're going to set that to 5 pixels. We're going to get that little space between the rows instead of the columns. Oh, I'm so sorry. The announcement date is, we don't have a date for the announcement yet. Isn't that frustrating? I'm so sorry. So we will let you know as soon as we know. The forum should stay up for a while. Yeah. I don't have an absolute date, but I don't think they're going to go away anytime soon. Yeah. It'll be okay. And yeah. I'm so sorry that all my answers to your questions are, at some point. It's a little bit zen, but it's not very satisfying as an answer, is it? Whoop. I'm going to find out what I've done to my Chrome at some point and fix it. So grid gap is a shorthand property for both grid row gap and grid column gap. If grid gap has one value, it'll give them the same gap. If it has two values, the first one is the rows and the second one is the columns. And if you forget that, that's not a big deal. It just means you'll write them down one way and then reverse them. It's super chill. So this is just a way to, ooh, that's double S. We don't need that. This is, ooh, this is going to be a way to do both rows and columns, but only have to type one. So if I put 10, it gives everybody a 10 pixel gap, but I want them to be different. I want the rows to have a 10 pixel gap, so we're good. But I want our columns to have a 20 pixel gap. Hey, we did that just fine. Everything continues to be fine. The world is big and scary and uncontrollable sometimes, but we're definitely on top of CSS Grid. CSS Grid can't hurt us. So, well, I say just as we come into control spacing, which is where it always hurts me. So far we've been talking about grid containers, and that's okay. That's cool. But we're also going to be conceptually thinking about the lines. And these are imaginary lines. And you say, Jess, why do you keep talking to me about philosophy and mental models and imaginary lines when programming is it's so absolute, isn't it? When we learn about programming or when people talk about programming, we think, oh gosh, that must be like a very pure science. And people, oh, well, there's a lot of philosophy in it. There's a lot of hypotheticals and there's a lot of mental models. And these hypothetical vertical lines are called lines. Yeah. Platypus points out that so far that's a good way to say it. We don't have the date for the announcement, but later, if later is a date. So, and we can number these lines in our head. You say, what? And I'm like, well, stick with me. Let's go ahead and make this real big. We're just going to focus on this one for a bit. So let's imagine that we're drawing a line and we've got one line here. Yeah. So wait, where's my left is here now. Oh, sorry, I'm mirrored. So we're starting here and we've got a line where the first column starts. We've got a line where the second container starts. We've got a line where the third. So we've got really lines conceptually drawn that let us mentally map our grid. Let's look at an example. Grid column 1, 3. This will make the item start at the first vertical line on the left and go through to the third line of the grid. And you say, what? Let's be cool. Let's be cool. So if we're looking at this and we say, I want this grid column to take up 1 of 3. That means I want it to start here in this first blue line and go all the way and stop at the second blue line. And that feels weird. And that's gonna feel weird. So let's just do it. Yeah? So we're gonna create an item, pale green. Okay. And what we're gonna do to this one is we're gonna say, hey, we're gonna make it consume the last 2 columns of the grid. And that means if we come back up to our grid here, if this was 1, 2, 3, 4, it means it would take up these last 2. So here we've only got 3. So let's see if I can do this. I bet I'm going to do it wrong, but you can always be wrong in development. It's no big deal. And if your boss yells at you for being wrong, just be like, well, it just says it's no big deal. I think I want this to start at 2 and go through 3. What do we think? Do we think that might be right? Why aren't you doing the thing I wanted you to do? Do you need spaces? Spaces don't seem to help. I'm going to slowly work out what's gone wrong here. Column. All right, I've spelled column right. I'm going to lovingly ask for some help here. Does it work if I say 1 out of 3? Okay, that works. Why? Make it consume the last 2 columns of the grid. So starting at 2 doesn't work. Does starting at 3 work? Okay. Starting at 3 definitely works. Oh, oh, oh. You know what? I'm a goofball. I was counting the columns, not the grids, not the lines. I'm such a goof. But it's okay to be a goof. So here I was saying start at the 2 line and end at the 3 line. And that's what it was already doing. So it says, Jess, I'm already doing that. But if I wanted to take up the last 2 columns, I need to say start at the 2 line and then end at the 4 line to occupy these 2 boxes. I'm such a goofus. And luckily, it's a good learning opportunity that it's not going to hurt you to be a goofus, even when other people can see you. So we started at the 2 line. We stretched it to end at the 4 line. So it's taking up those last 2 columns. And this is the kind of stuff that can be so frustrating, not just when you're first starting out, but no matter how long you've been programming. And what I really recommend is getting, I think, the most valuable. Yeah. So what's really the function of the grid column? And the function of the grid column, and we're gonna we'll sort of feel it out a bit more as we're experimenting with it. But it's really to give us an invisible grid. It's to give us an invisible map on our website that lets us design responsively around. So say, hey, I don't know what screen people are going to be looking at this on, but hey, if I make a grid, if I make an imaginary grid, I can design to fit this grid, and then folks can go ahead and apply this grid to their viewports, to their screens. And it feels weird, it feels strange, and we're just going to mess with it until it feels less weird. So we're to make the element with the item 5 consume the last 2 rows. So what we did last time is we used those 1, 2, 3, 4 grid lines that were columns. And now we're going to use these 1, 2, 3, 4 grid lines that are rows to space it out. Let's see how I screw this up. Oh, we want a grid. Oh, here, what happens if we try 2 to 4 again? Hey, fabulous. Because we're already on that second line. We've got 1, which is where the blue and orange and light blue start. Then we've got 2, where those end and the pink and green start. 3 is going to be where 4 stops, where the pink stops. But then 5, wait, I'm wrong. 1 is going to be the top where that starts. 2 is going to be where the pink and green box start. 3 is going to be where the pink box ends. And then 4 is going to be where the green box ends. It feels super weird. It's gonna feel super weird. Like I flubbed up explaining it twice. It's still weird to me, but we can just go ahead and experiment till it feels a little bit less weird. Oh, I'm so sorry. You all are not boring me. I'm just very lazy. So we've used justify self before, haven't we? And that's where we say, hey, I want you to position yourself within yourself horizontally. So I want you to arrange yourself within yourself. Ooh. Sorry. You all are so patient and so kind. So here what we're doing is we've got some different values. By default, when you say justify self, it's going to stretch. So if you just say justify self, it's going to go ahead and stretch out to fit. But you can also say other things. You say, hey, justify self start. I want you to align this content at the left of the cell. Say, okay, not a problem. Align content center. It's going to center that for you. Align content end is going to go ahead and put that at the right of the cell. So we're going to come to item number 2. And look, Free Code Camp knows that grid is hard. So it's been giving us all of these extra, hey, here are these comments to help you. Justify self. Oh, have I just... Oh, it's because I'm a goofus. What have I done wrong here? But I've spelled justify wrong, haven't I? Justify self. Well, that hasn't done anything by itself, has it? Oh, wait, that's the issue. Oh, weird. How weird. Isn't that weird? What else could we have done here? We take that away, justify self, it drops back to the default, which is stretch. And that's why just justify self by itself didn't really do anything. If I say stretch to fit all your available space, it's like, babe, I already did that. What if we say start? It's going to squish it over at the front. What if I say end? Oh, it's going to squish it back over there. But we said center. Yeah, super chill. Oh gosh, you know what? Egg Roll's making a really good point and said, Jess, we use justify content and flags, not justify self. And you are absolutely, impossibly, unstoppably right. I'm just trying to confuse y'all. Oh, we're just about halfway done. Cool. This is a very good time to say, hey, Free Code Camp's completely separate from us. If you have the cash and you want to, becoming a monthly supporter of Free Code Camp's a really cool thing to do. It's $5 a month, but don't you dare spend money you don't have. So now we just in the last one, we learned about aligning an item horizontally. And now we're going to align an item vertically using align self. Justify aligns it horizontally. Align aligns it vertically. Cool. And it does all the same things. You can say center or start or end. Same deal. We're going to take item 3, which is helpfully put this on. I'm going to say align. Ooh, we're going to put that in caps lock to yell. Align self. And by default, it's stretch. But we don't want stretch. We want end. Oh gosh. Oh, I actually quite like this, being able to just squish it. Yeah. We're halfway done. We're zipping through. Everything's chill. Ooh, we'll be getting to talking about your homework soon. So you can align everything using justify items. And that's saying, hey, whatever you got in this container, I want you to squish or stretch all of this. I want you to align all of these using justify items. And that's saying, hey, I don't want to do these all individually. I want them all to look the same. Can we please? Myself, center all our items horizontally. Was that center? Oh gosh. Justify self. What have I done wrong? Justify items. Sorry, I'm a consistent goofus. Goofus being a highly tech. Yes. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going to say, hey, instead of justifying one thing, I want you to justify all the things. And I want you to center them based on what they've got in them. So yeah, justify is usually going to be rows, align used to be columns. Yeah. We are going to come in here. We are going to run our tests. everything continues to be fine. Those of you who are just starting your day, this is obviously proof that you're going to have a very easy day. Those of you, so what determine, Monica, this is such a good question. So we've just gone past this, but you notice that the width of these, let's go ahead and do the, let's do this one because this is going to be the same question here. So we're gonna, line items is going to do the same thing, but for vertical alignment. We're going to see something similar with the size, I bet. You say, okay, that's weird though. Why are these this size? And these, the width in that case, or the height in this case, is going to be based on the content. So these numbers inside are saying, hey, you can't be any taller than me. Well, I mean, a little bit taller with the padding, but you can't be smaller than I am because you would squish me. So the height or the width, when you set these, is going to be determined by the elements inside. So the items inside the container, even though these items, so the boxes are items in a gray container, but each of the boxes is a container that holds these numbers. Weird. Cool. Yeah. We're going to run our tests. Everything's going to continue to be super chill. So we're going to divide the grid into an area template. And I'm not super familiar with this. I think this is going to be weird. So let's get weird together. So we can take parts of our grid and say, hey, here are what these areas are. So here, if we had a grid template areas and we said header, 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 we think that would make these three at the top, headers. And then we come down, we say advert content. I think that first cell, in the second grid down, is going to be an advertisement. And then we're going to have two pieces of content. Okay. So it's really sort of setting a tic-tac-toe board, setting an actual grid. And with us specifying, here's what's in those grids. So we're going to change the template so the footer area spans the entire bottom row. It's not going to change what it looks like until later. So right now we've got header, header, header. So 1, 2, and 3 are headers. 4 would be an advert. 5 would be content. And we think this implies that we would have a number 6 that would be content at some point. And then we've got what would be number 7, we assume, would come in. Advert, footer. And here it's saying, well, turn that advert into a footer. But nothing's going to visually change yet. We're gonna look at this in a second. So we've got a couple questions. So when we change the height of the container to match the size of the child element, the item, are we assuming that items have heights and widths defined somewhere? So they all will. So here, when we change that, the height and the width is determined by the font size. See, oh, cool. The font size of these numbers is setting that, and we can change that ourselves if we really want to. So if you've got multiple items in a container, what will determine? So if different containers have different, hang on. So this is a really good question. When you've got multiple containers with different sized items, they can resize differently based on what items are in there. If you've got different sized children within if you've got different sized children within one, if you've got different sized items, not their children, but here we're talking about it, within the same container, I think that you know what? Let's look that up. I was going to say, I think it's the biggest one. So how is element size determined or containers with items of multiple sizes. Hmm. Oh, oh, of course there's going to be a smashing mag. Oh, and of course it's Rachel Andrew. You know, Rachel Andrew is just fantastic at everything. It's unnecessary. It would be frustrating if she wasn't so lovely. It wouldn't. I would still be excited for her. So this looks like it's really, really useful blog post on. And for those of you who it's over in the chat, both in YouTube and in Twitch. So we've got the Smashing Magazine Understanding CSS Sizing Layout, which is probably going to be the best resource for this. So we're going to change this to footer. Wait, hang on. I'm going to mentally jump back to where I used to be. Cool. So this is letting us set areas. And right now, this isn't going to have any visual effect, but later on, we're going to go ahead and see what that looks like. We're going to explore more. But here it says, cool, you've passed the test. All I needed you to do was conceptually understand that when you label this, you're changing what it's going to be. So let's talk about planning. So we're going to be placing items in a grid area using the grid area property. And this is really all about planning and then designing to your plan, isn't it? If I come in and say, oh, I've got the opportunity to use grid area, I should probably know when I start coding, where is my header? Which of these items go on which rows? And CSS Grid really, really benefits from a thoughtful approach and a lot of planning. And that's why I'm terrible at it. So this lets the grid know I want item 1 to go in the area named header. So we've already set, where would we set? We set these header, 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 advert, content, content, footer, footer. And now what we're going to do is we're going to slap, oh gosh, that was a bit loud. We're going to slap the name tags. We're going to slap the, we're going to tell, we're going to tell folks what they are so they know where they're going to go. So item number 5, we're going to tell it it's a footer. So we're going to come in here and say, hey, item number 5, how you doing? Lovely item. We've already told you that you're pale green. And here, we're going to set your grid area. We're going to set that to footer. Yeah. So we're still not seeing anything really change yet. But that's okay. Oh, no, it's not. I've done it wrong. Oh. You know what? There we go. I was going to say, I thought I was going to change. So grid area, grid is apparently spelled Grid. Fabulous. What we've done is say, hey, item number 5, I just wanted to give you a heads up, you're a footer. And item number 5 says, fantastic. I really appreciate that. When I see the areas that have been designated for footers, I'm just going to run over there and hang out there. And then when we come down and look at our grid template areas, we say, we've got header, header, header. All right. Advert, because that's what the web is like these days. Content, content. And then we've got footer, footer, footer. And because footer takes up this whole bottom row, and we only have one item designated as a footer, they've got room to just stretch out and be real relaxed down there. Everything is fine. You all are so patient about me just having to drag this around ceaselessly. Okay, but what if I don't want to make a template? What if I want to live dangerously? Say, okay, yeah, who doesn't want to live dangerously? We can use the grid area properly differently. And if you don't always already create an areas template, so if you don't create the one where it's like grid areas, header, 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 content, 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 you don't have to do that. You can get a little bit more chaotic. So let's look at this example, grid area 1124. Now let's just see what that looks like. Let's do that to number 5. What? So here, it's going to consume the rows between, wait, oh, oh, hang on. Let me go ahead and get this one as well. That's a really good explainer. Why am I was about to ask you all why I'm really. Here's what we're looking at. Grid area. That's what we've got right here. Oh, heck. And then our first figure is the horizontal line we start at. So we're starting at 1, that first horizontal line. And the next one we have is the vertical line we start at. So this number 1 here, we're saying we start at number 1. The next number we give it is the horizontal line to end at. So we're saying, hey, start at 1 and end at 2, which is what this green box has absolutely done. And then the last value is the vertical line to end at, which is way over here. And we've got 4. So it started 1, 2, 3, 4, and takes us all the way to the end of the page. Isn't this weird? Sorry, I'm far too delighted about this being weird. And again, this seems cruel and unusual, but the more you get used to this, the more you do it, the less weird it'll feel. We're going to start with a grid area that we haven't pre-planned because no one tells us what to do. Oh, it's a word puzzle, isn't it? We want to place this between the 3rd and 4th horizontal lines. So the horizontal lines, let's get this one back. So the horizontal line to start at is the first number. So we want it to start at the 3rd horizontal line. And then the second number we add is the vertical line to start at. So we're going to have to jump around a little bit. So I want to be between the 3rd and 4th horizontal line. So I'm going to skip, and I'm going to give you the horizontal line to end at. We're going to put this one in a second. Very bad syntax, isn't it? You know what, Monica, you are brilliant. This feels a lot like top and bottom left, but with lines. And that's really the power of grid. That we've got the opportunity to say, hey, we've got a mental model here that we're working from. We also have a mental model when we say top right, bottom left, but this mental model is a little bit more flexible. It's got a lot more power because we're able to draw as many imaginary lines on our grid as we want. We can get as deeply chaotic as we'd like, within the bounds of accessibility and within the bounds of accessible design. So I was like, get weird, but make sure your users can still use it. So we want to end our horizontal line on the 4th. But then we're going to come in and put in our verticals. We're going to go with the first vertical line and end this on the 4th vertical line. Oh, okay. So this has come all the way down to the bottom to get 3. And then we've got 4. So we're starting at the 3rd. 1, 2, 3, the 3rd vertical line. Or the 3rd horizontal line. I'm rubbish. We're starting at the 3rd horizontal line and going all the way to the 4th. But we're starting at the 1st vertical line and going all the way to the 4th. That's going to be our entire parent container. Are we feeling okay with this, or is this weird? This is weird, right? But we're just going to keep being weird for another couple lessons. And if it doesn't feel super normal, good news. You can use grid on your projects. Aren't I mean where I'm like, if this still feels weird and bad, you can do even more work on it. So we're going to reduce repetition using the repeat function. I'm going to say grid template columns, grid template rows. We had a value for each. But if I wanted to create and this is exactly what we were just talking about with Monica's really good question, saying, well, not even a question, really, a really, really focused observation, saying this felt like what we were doing with aligning top, bottom, top, left, but with lines. And here we can make as many lines as we want. That sounds much more menacing. It's much less nefarious than you think it is. So what we're going to do is we can use the repeat function to make 100 rows if we want. I mean, I don't want to type the same thing 100 times. So let's go ahead and let's steal. Well, I mean, copy and pasting isn't always stealing, but let's look at what this looks like. So we've got template rows. I could create 100 of them at 50 pixels. Hmm. And this is going to feel like really programming language friendly concepts. So repeat. So like the idea of a loop is definitely going to come back in JavaScript and haunt you. JavaScript's going to be fine. But this idea of repeating, and this hasn't changed anything yet. Oh, I think because we've got two different ones. Let's go ahead and see what they want us to do, just so we can feel this out. So the repeat just says, hey, I want you to do this so and so many times for this measurement. So we're going to use repeat to get rid. So we're going to change grid template columns. I quiet when I type columns because I can never type it properly. And when we repeat it, we're going to go ahead. Let's comment this out. By default, it's only ever going to take the first one if you've got two contradictory things. But we want to comment this out just to go ahead and keep it neat so that future devs looking at our code go, which one are we supposed to use? What we want to do is we want to eliminate repetition. So we're going to say repeat. How many columns do we have here? We've got 1, 1, 1. We've got 3 columns. Okay. So repeat 3 times. And how we want them to all one fraction. And that's a little frustrating because this looks exactly the same as what we just started with, doesn't it? But it taught us that repeat was really useful. And here, this feels like the same amount of typing, doesn't it? But if I had said 5, that would have been way more typing. Or if I had said 6, that would have been, even though we don't have 6 items, that would have been even more typing. So even though it didn't save us a lot of typing this time, this sort of repetition can be really, really helpful. We're going to run our tests. Oh, we are just swinging through this time. Isn't everything chill? Well, I say while doing CSS Grid and chuckling at y'all about how hard it is. So when we have set sizes, sometimes we want to set a maximum or a minimum. And we say, hey, we know that the world is responsive. We know that we're going to have users with all different screen sizes and all different viewports, and they're going to resize stuff and do weird stuff. And what we're saying here is, I want to set a rule that this item is never going to get any bigger than this or smaller than this when our grid containers change size. So even when our grid containers stretch or squish, we want to make sure the items inside have sort of a certain type of size protected. Well, let's see what that feels like. So I'm going to use minmax is the property. I believe this is also a term for like folks who do role-playing stuff, isn't it? Where you balance your character. I don't know. There's something with balancing character points. I think possibly video games as well. You all can tell how extremely uncool I am. Terminally uncool. Someday it will be the end of me. So we want to use the 1FR and the repeat function with a column size that has a minimum width of 90 pixels and a maximum width of 1FR. What? So what? Sorry. How about we look at the example first? Ooh, hang on. Somebody's asking a really, really good question. I want to touch on that. So, for our purposes, are screen size and viewports effectively the same? And not always. So if somebody's using their phone, the browser of the phone is almost always the exact same size as the whole phone, isn't it? As the screen. But If you're on a computer or if you're on a different a device with a bigger screen, folks can resize their stuff. So really, when we're talking about viewports, we're talking about what what sort of window into your web content people have. That can be the same as the screen size, but it's not always going to be the same. Oh, Felix is asking a question I just straight up don't know. Is minmax a CSS property or a helper method like repeat? You know what? What do we do when we don't know? CSS minmax. And we are going to our beloved MDN because that's where minmax. Ooh, it's a CSS function. Ooh, ooh. And for those of you who haven't done, like, if we haven't done, and I'm not saying, oh, some of you should have. The idea of functions is going to be something we dive into a lot more when we start doing JavaScript. So right now, functions are like properties that do stuff. And you say, Jess, what do you mean? Properties do stuff. I say, yeah, they do. But trust me, this is going to make a little bit more sense when we go back to and do some JavaScript. So it's a function. Yeah. Oh, so Felix is saying, oh, hey, yep, that it's a helper method function rather than a property. Yeah, I think that's a really, really fair assessment. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to hide things from you all where I say, hey, we're not really going to talk about functions in detail yet, but I want to sort of abstract everything out. Oh, Sunday saying, "Hey, good morning. It's morning for you. How am I? I'm really. How's I? You know what? I didn't ask when I started the stream. How's everybody doing today? How are your Mondays? Do you know? And if you're in a region where you celebrate Halloween, how is your Halloween? Like, let's get some social. Tell me about. And if you had cute Halloween costumes, let me fuss over them. You love how this has nothing to do with CSS, and I just want to hear about how y'all's day is going. It's Sunday, just influencing me to be a nicer person. So, what's going on here? What is going on here? Grid template rows. Grid template columns. I'm going to copy this over and see what this is doing because I don't know what this is doing. So, these grid template columns are 100 pixels. Minimum is 50 pixels and the maximum is 200 pixels. I got it. All right. So this, wait, what? So the first column is 100 pixels wide. The second column has a minimum width of 50 pixels and a maximum width of 200 pixels. Okay. Yes. Does minmax sit in here then? Do I put minmax inside this? I have no idea what I'm doing. Everything's terrible. Minimum of 90 pixels. A maximum of 1 FR. Delete you. That doesn't feel like that worked at all. Oh, wait. It's like I left out the 3. No, that doesn't work at all. I'm going to reset this code because I've been rubbish. Oh, we've got other people cheating. Well, we've got other people giving me the answers. Platypus is saying, where you live, will you get another week of spooky season? What? And how can I have this, please? Oh, Felix is cheating and giving me the answer. Repeat count value, where value can be min-max. Let's try that. Actually, let's leave this up. You are after my own heart, letting me cheat. So repeat, count is 3, and the value can be min-max. Yeah. Where does that syntax go? Count value, where the value can be minmax. I still think I'm doing this right. And this is suggesting that I'm not doing it right. 90 pixels and 1 FR. But now you want to work? So this extremely wobbly syntax, which Felis has beautifully and helpfully given me the answer to. And now when we wobble this, it should, you notice it'll stretch way out, but it won't shrink past a certain level. It'll just sort of wumble off stage. Yeah, this feels like what it was asking for. If I run all tests and it doesn't say good job, I'm going to fight my computer. Y'all ready? Oh, and it says 5%, and that's just because I went away and came back. We know we're probably like 80 something. Look how absolutely deeply chaotic this is. Isn't this exciting? Who loves some chaos? So, yeah, do you know what? This is feeling a lot like when we were using Flexbox, wasn't it? So we've got shrink and grow, but here we're sort of doing it in a grid. So you know what? I love to lie to you all about it. Well, I hate to be all philosophical. I don't hate it at all. If you'll forgive me being a bit philosophical, really, we're able to do the same kinds of things with Flexbox and Grid, but we're applying a really different mental model. And what these commands we're learning, what these functions and what these properties are giving us is tools that work with our emerging new mental model. And you know what? We've got folks who are actual good programmers in the chat. So Felis and Platypus are both hanging out in Twitch. I bet there's other like actual proper good programmers in both in the Twitch stream and on the YouTube side. But um, I will get the good programmers to back me up. I'm only calling them out because I know them personally and I know they're fantastic at everything. It's disgusting. Oh gosh, and nice and clever. It's just oof, oof, oof. But I'm going to get the good programmers to back me up. Programming is mostly about mental models, right? Yeah. Like it's mostly about learning to teach your brain a new thing and then teaching your computer what your brain knows. I don't even know if that makes sense. So we're going to use something called autofill. And that's cool. It says autofill will automatically, dun, 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 with the auto, make as many rows or as many columns the size I want. And just do it. It'll just do it. It'll repeat it. It's great. And here, instead of saying repeat 3 times or 5 times, I'm saying, well, you know the size. I've given you the size of these columns. I want you to repeat this as many times as it takes to fill up my container. And when the container changes size, it'll keep giving you new columns. It'll auto inject columns. It's going to be cool. So we're going to use our first grid. We're going to use autofill. Repeat. Autofill. You don't actually have to say, look at that. This is saying, look, wait, we want to set a minimum of 60 pixels, maximum of 1 frame rate. And now what we can do is we can resize this. Oop. Actually, that doesn't do much vertically, does it? We can resize this, and it's just going to magically change things for us, which is really, really exciting. Everything's fine, and everything's going to be fine. Oh, wait, grid templates column, repeat. I said, oh. Fine, you want me to do it right. And now will it? Yeah. Check out what 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are doing. As I squish, we get our columns auto-filled. This is kind of exciting. They can't get too small because we've got a minimum set. So instead of getting smaller, boom, they live downstairs. Platypus says it's much better. Programming's qualified guessing. You just guess a lot. You write down what you think might work, and then you look at what went wrong. It's like experimenting, but for people who don't want to use test tubes. It says we're 9% complete. We know we're pretty much done. We're in the home stretch. Everything's going to be fine. And now we can use AutoFit to make these flexible layouts. So in our second grid, we're going to use autofill with repeat to fill the grids with columns that have a minimum width of 60 pixels and a maximum of 1 frame ratio. Where are we? Yeah, give me that. So repeat grid template columns. Wait, do I get rid of grid template columns or do I just, well, let's see. Like Phyllis just said, experimentation. I don't know which way I'm supposed to do this. I'll do them both ways. It'll be chill. What we're doing here is we're going to say auto fit. Then what do you want for auto fit? You want repeat? We want our repeat to be auto. Wait. I'm a goofus. Autofit is a function, not a property. Ha 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 ha. Auto fit a function. So we've got our sizes right. It just wanted me to change that to say auto fit. And now when I do this, it should automatically resize as well, but it's going to keep insert empty rows or columns. So it's going to inject empty spaces when I need them, whereas the autofill doesn't. Rad. Everything's fine. You know what? When I keep saying everything's fine, I don't know which one of us I'm trying to reassure. So, and this was a question from earlier. Somebody was like, "Hey, can you explain a little bit more of why we're even using grid?" It seemed, and you didn't say this. I bet it was Eggroll, because Eggroll's an absolute sweetheart. Eggroll was saying, "Oh, can you explain a little bit more about why we might use grid?" And I'd say, because I'm less nice, I'd say, well, because grid's kind of fussy. Grid's real fussy. Why are we using grid? It's so fussy. Well, we can use grid to make our site much more responsive. We know where on our Imagining grid we want stuff to sit. And no matter how people's viewports change, we can set some limitations on that to keep our vision together. So we can remember we used media queries when we talked. Nothing's up. I was just praising you for asking good questions. Everything's fine. I'm just picking on you for being good. This does look like a technical documentation. Somebody is well ahead. This looks a lot like the technical documentation project, doesn't it? Oh gosh, if I was going to start the project soon, I might maybe bookmark this. And you all should be starting the project soon, please, because there's the only homework after this is the projects. So when the viewport width is 300% or more, the number of columns changes from 1 to 2. Ooh, that hasn't worked. What are you doing? So we've got this. Oh, wow, this is super hard. And the viewport is 400 pixels or more. Okay. The container class should have grid template areas property in which the header and footer areas occupy the top and bottom respectively. Okay, hang on. What? Oh, heck, wait. I'm wrong. I love to be wrong. I got it. So when the viewport is more than 400 pixels, and that's the instruction we're getting here, then the header and footer areas, I got it. We're cool. So what we're doing here is we're setting different rules. And I say, hey, if if the viewport is at least 300 pixels, here's how I want stuff set up. And down here, I'm saying, well, guess what? Actually, if we've got more space, if the viewport's at least 400 pixels, I want the header hey, that just automatically headed over. We say, well, if you've got more space, we want to go ahead. We think the advert, we've got a contract with our advert people, and the adverts need to be at least this big. But if it's 400 pixels or more, we can stretch out the header and footer, and our advert's still big enough. You have to spell footer right for it to work. Fabulous. And this really shows us what we were looking at earlier with this templates and what kind of changes we can make with that. Ooh, I wonder how many more of these we've got. Deep, deep chaos. So what if we took a grid and we put a grid in a grid? Yeah, you want to put a grid in a grid? Let's put a grid in a grid. So here we have a grid with a grid. We've got the header, advert, content, footer, and then we're seeing paragraph 1, paragraph 2 gridded out as well. We're going to come and we're going to make that a little bit more explicitly a grid, aren't we? At element 3, we're going to say, hey, I want you to be a grid with 2 columns. Yeah. So the template columns, width to be auto. Oh. How did I do this last time? Wait, when in doubt. No, I want Control F. Let's look at where else display lives on the. You're not going to show me, are you? Where else can I find display grid? Okay, so we're going to take display grid and we're going to set it for this item as well. We're going to say, hey, I know we've got a grid going on around us. Do me another grid. And the width is going to be auto and 1 FR. I feel like that feel right? You're going to say no. Yeah. The class should be, yeah, but how do I do that? Grid template columns, auto 1 FR. Did I spell grid template columns wrong? You know what? It's the exact same thing as you say here. So I'm going to copy and paste you. It's okay. I'm just checking my work. I'm not cheating. I'm cheating. Grid. Oh, look at what I did. You don't add a comma there. Thank you very much. So apparently we do not have columns in there. But check this out. We now have a grid in our grid, and things are feeling very, very newspapery very quickly, aren't they? So don't put a comma between your grid template columns values because that's wrong. But we're feeling pretty good. Look at that. Look at that. We are completely, fully, blissfully done only with the tutorials for CSS Grid. We're not done with all of the CSS Grid you'll ever have to learn ever, but we're done with these lessons for now. The only thing you have to do, and let's say the only thing for the biggest, hardest part, is do the projects. So your homework is, if you haven't started the projects, that's okay, but you probably want to go ahead and get started. We're going to take a look. We're going to take a deep breath. And come all the way down to the projects. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projects that you're going to need to do to claim your certification. And your homework is going to be to go ahead and get through as much of these as you can. Who here has finished? I'm asking you to raise your hand. I'm back in the classroom. Who's finished your tribute page? Actually, if you finished any of these, just yell at me in the chat so I can chuckle over how good and clever you are. But your homework is to work on these with as much time as you have in your week. Not all of your free time in your week, mind you, because your other homework is still to take care of yourself and relax. But oh, egg roll, you finished your egg roll saying, I finished my tribute page. Yes. And survey form. Oh, brilliant, perfect, sublime, complete. That means your homework is to go to a product landing page and a technical documentation. But really, don't spend all of your time. Don't lock yourselves in at home. Don't become weird web hermits. Look at that. You've been doing ages. And the product landing page is really challenging, isn't it? What? You're on your last one? No, no. I mean, Linda, I'm not at all surprised. You're always just like, raw, I'm on top of everything. So yeah, your homework is to go ahead and spend some time working on these. We'll have a question and answer section next Monday where the only thing we're going to be looking at is, hey, what kind of questions you have about this? What kind of things can we demo? It's going to be super, super chill. See, don't be like me and Felis. Go outside and play and have a nice life. Although, Felis, I'm going to hang you out to dry on this one. I'm working a lot less these days. You all know that after I finish the stream, I'm going to do deadly serious programming and I'm going to work. So I'm going to get my gym bag. I'm going climbing. But no, you must relax and take good care of yourselves as well, or else. Felis is lovely and saying like, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not the boss. I'm the boss." And you must please work on your responsible web design projects to get your certification. But also, please relax and take good care of yourselves. It's cold in many places, and it'll be super chill. Can you compile a full C++ into WASM like as your project? Like, are you asking if you can do this with your free time, or are you asking if it's possible? If you're asking if I think it's a good idea, sure. I mean, go ahead. Personally, I don't know anything about C++, and only marginal things about WASM. So, and for those of you who are not familiar, C++ is a programming language that is too hard for me, and WASM is WebAssembly. Oh, so the question is this possible? I have no idea. Felis has got the right answer. Oh, you should probably try it and see. I'm so sorry. The scope of the stream we're on now is sort of intro web design and web development. Yeah, C++ might be a little bit out of scope for this session. Also, I don't know. But what do we say when we don't know something? You can ask somebody who might know, and I don't. You can look it up, which might be really useful here. And you can also get weird, which is what Felis suggested. Try it and see. Oh, and I'm going to open this up to the class. Do we have any recommendations for writing better code? Yeah. So some games and activities, and you said CSS Froggy can be really good. Do you know what? And it's going to sound like I'm telling you to go do work for free. I really find that trying to make some contributions on open source projects can be a really, really good way to do that. Yeah. Just because you're getting to see everyone else's code and it's really well formed. And if you're on a really friendly open source project like Free Code Camp, they're not going to get mad if your code's a little messy. They're going to come and get you and say, hey, I might style it like this, or I might lay it out like that. So getting that human feedback can be really useful as well. Yeah. And you know what? This trial and error. I know this sounds so frustrating. I know it's going to make me sound really mean. Were you saying, you know what, to make things work, I've got a lot of trial and error, and you wind up with bits of code that do nothing. I'm so sorry that that's actually the optimal learning process. You're frustrated right now, but you're doing everything right. I'm sorry that that's so frustrating. Yeah, if anybody else has any questions, please go ahead and yell at me. And if not, we're going to dismiss class early where, oh, I'm the meanest teacher in the world, where you all will get about half an hour to work on your projects. Ha ha ha. Because you blocked this out in your calendar. You've got that free time. I know it. And I will have time to, a girl saying no homework. No, that's no, comma, homework. Yay. Your homework is to work on your tribute projects. There's no lesson homework this day. We're done. You're done with all of our little lessons, just the projects now. Ravi's asking what my favorite programming language is. And you know what? Felis actually has my answer. It's really the one that works. Python's so friendly and easy and happy, and JavaScript so all over the place. But really, I'll just pick up whatever's useful. Felis, is always out here saying, hey, you know what? Trial and error can also be try and improve. I love this. I love this. Every time it doesn't work, you're still learning. It's not a failure. You've got that learning outcome. Deadly serious professional developers, we do this all the time. Although I wouldn't really call myself deadly serious. So yeah, it's okay. Even when it doesn't do the thing you want it to do, you're more fully building out your mental model of how that programming language works and how these different components fit together. Even when stuff sucks, it's mostly okay. My brilliant, my beautiful, my favorite, excited learners, I am going to let you all go on and have a lovely morning, a lovely afternoon, or if you're up late, someone was saying, oh, it's 10 here, go to bed. But your homework is to work on, oh, so you're still a little bit confused about inheritance and basic CSS. I don't have any recommendations for understanding these concepts better, but I'm going to go ahead and ask folks on my Twitter, just because folks tend to be really, really useful. So I'm going to ask them and say, hey, does anybody have any good resources for understanding CSS inheritance better? And I'll try and drop that in next week if that's all right, Monica. Oh, fuss at me if I don't. Fabulous. I'm going to go ahead and let you all go. Your homework is to have as relaxing as a week as possible. Remember back when we were doing our lessons to say, oh, you have to have a relaxing day. This whole week, you have to be as gentle to yourself as you can, but also get through as much of the responsive web design projects as you can, and feel free to write out your questions. We'll come and we'll answer your questions. Next week's session is just going to be about question and answer and exploring these projects. We'll jump around a bit. You all please have the easiest morning, evening, or afternoon, and I will chat to many of you next week. Good luck.